If you've learned anything, great. I invite anybody to contact me through any means to have conversations about all the stuff. That's how we learn together as a community. And I'd like to just shift the focus right now. So thank you so much. Is it Jay? For your conversation and your feedback and it's I just find it so fascinating people that are passionate about healing and evolution. It's like as a species, this is what we need to move forward and evolve past all of this nonsense that we're in right now. And I think it's there. The potential is there. I mean, humans have a tendency of fucking things up, but hopefully we don't fuck this one up. Okay, on that, Joni Poon, master's in music therapy. She is a beautiful, masterful musician and pianist, especially. But she plays the zither as well as the guitar and pretty much any other instrument she puts her hands on. It's just mind blowing to me, who can barely, clap properly on beat. She is she has a master's in clinical counseling and psychology and specializes in psychedelic therapy, psychedelic assisted therapy. And she is an RCC, which is a registered clinical counselor in British Columbia. And she also happens to be my beautiful wife. And there she is, Joni Poon. So come to the stage and take the mic away.
I wait. Yeah, I this is really interesting. I'm not used to just talking straight for 1 hour. So maybe perhaps David, I'll take up your offer and you ask questions and maybe I answer.
Sure, we could do that. We're gonna reverse the chair. Joni is the interviewer on the blog that we have called Hot Pot. I don't mind plugging that. It's pretty cool. It's Joni talking to all sorts of different people who are of all sorts of different colors and creeds about their experiences in life and in their psychology personally. And then there's a little undertone of psychedelics in that too. But we didn't want to scare the Asians off too quickly because drugs and Asians don't historically go hand in hand very well together. So we're just expanding into our own communities, nice and easy. Easy does it, and they're growing. It's a really beautiful thing. Um, but yeah, we can totally do that. Joni, go ahead. Why don't you start? Where would you like to start?
Um, hmm. I
You want to
think
start at the beginning?
I think part of this journey, why I like really starting developing this passion working with substances and psychedelics for healing was just because of my own personal experiences. And I've
Mm,
done many different types of therapies prior, like talk therapy, um, somatic. mm, I've done Reiki, and something felt like it was still missing.
mm. So tell us about sort of how that missing piece, like where did that come from? Was it like, does it come from your heritage? Or you're Chinese and you're also Japanese. That's right?
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have mixed heritage yourself. Um, and and tell us maybe a little bit about your childhood and how that might have helped set you up for what you do now.
Mhm. Yeah, I see someone asked, did I have early spiritual leanings? And yeah, and so yeah, as ever since I was young, or I am very spiritual, and I can't explain it. Oh, I can always remember just feeling connected to something much bigger and beyond and more beautiful than me. And
Mm,
that brings me such peace and joy, which I've
mhm,
never been able to experience in any type of modalities of therapy, except for
mm,
when I did hypnotherapy before and someone did hypnotize me. That was another time I went, like, I could not explain.
Mm. It's I think I can only speak for myself and for the people that have told me how they feel in 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 your sound baths. But I think that's a gift that you have passed on to other people through your beautiful ability to hold space in sound. And it's such an astonishing thing. So maybe you can tell us a bit about your experience with the healing through sound and through music, because that's sort of where your healing journey began. And it's come to a place where it's a truly refined practice, where it's more of a harmonic odyssey through music and song, infused with low relational doses of 5-MeO DMT. Um, and it's something that's so well done and so well structured around these protocols that you've uh, helped um, uh, that you've helped build, and that other practitioners and you can look them up. And actually highly recommend somaheart.com. Joni, can you type that into the chat? Somaheart.com. Aga and Deus, they're very experienced practitioners. I won't get into specifics of what they do, but you can look them up on their website, somaheart.net. And one of the things that they've done is they're also beautiful musicians like Joni, and they have taken up the sort of the challenge of using our light wands from Lucinor in their 5-MeO DMT sound journey. And they invited me to participate and Joni to participate in theirs. And I think it was their second one that they had done, or maybe their third with our product, with the Lucinor product. And it it's a really beautiful synergistic intentional way of using five and using music. And it was really nice to receive it, be on the receiving end for both Joni and I, because even when we hold space and I get to lie down during the sound bath, it's still a little bit hard to be completely present. Um, because I'm always, making sure people are okay. That's my worrying mind, my monkey mind that gets the better of me sometimes. But Joni, tell us about um tell us about your music therapy and how you heal people through music.
Oh yeah. Just music is so powerful and it can be healing in so many different ways. The most beautiful thing I found that it allows one to express maybe what words cannot, feelings. And when we truly allow us to feel and move through those emotions, that's when the healing begins because you're not stuck. Your emotions are not stuck. You're not hanging on to it. And it allows you to weave something beautiful so you can see beyond just the pain, beyond
Mm.
the constructs that you think that it's limiting you. And you get to explore and create. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to offer someone to be able to get out of their head and just be fully present,
Mhm.
to engage in the music, to play if they're willing and brave enough, or to
Mhm.
just really lie down there and listen.
Thank you, Lana. Yes, it's the so my heart. I apologize. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's so beautifully put, Joni. That's so beautifully put. Um, so how, in your opinion, do you think harmonics synergistically support the experience of um, healing and the experience of um, 5-MeO DMT at a low dose? Like why does that seem to be such a synergistic, beautiful relationship between the molecule and the music?
Yeah. So it's really interesting with 5-MeO or and then DMT. It does like different types of sounds and different types of energy and frequency. To me, the easiest way to understand is almost like it has a different vibe. With NN, because the energetics in the body, somatic sensations are more uplifting, it does like faster upbeats and more music, or it kind of matches that uplifting tempo and mood. The visuals and the insights and the downloads are more vivid
Mm,
and almost in a way you can not only see but feel it as well.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, synesthesia is something that I experience often um, through psychedelics, um, which can be very beautiful, if not a little bit off-kiltering at first, but you get used to it. And in Sound Bath, in yours and in others where I've had a chance to really sink in, um, I can see the room through the sound when I'm deeply meditating in Sound Bath and if and even more so if I'm using like a listen or low relational product to do that. So I can see the sound. In your bio, it says you were born in Hong Kong. Are you still connected to there? And do you know anything about the psychedelic landscape there or in Asia in general?
Um, yes, I still have some relatives there. I do not know too much about the psychedelic community or landscape out in Hong Kong, just because the family out there are very conservative, so we don't really talk about these things. Um, and yeah, so I can't talk more beyond that. I know um, there's some places
But
that
you can just speak to you.
Hmm?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
No,
say that again.
sorry. I was just saying, but you can speak to your own experience in that,
Hmm.
in in the experience of experiencing psychedelics in your Asian community, in your Hong Kong Chinese family, that also has a religious background as well, right?
Yeah. So I grew up my parents are very conservative and very traditional in their Asian practices. And because Hong Kong was colonized, there were a lot of missionaries. And so they went from Catholics to Christians. I don't know how that really happened, but from actually like Buddhist, Catholic, and then Christians. And I was brought up in that really unique, both very oppressive and very structured and very how do you describe it? Mm, limiting in how one can be accepted or viewed or seen. And I lost my train of thought here.
No, no, it's okay. Yeah. You're talking about the limiting worldviews of your parents and your family through, like the lens of being both traditionally Chinese and having all of those, I guess you could call them a bit more, um, hmm, what's the word when you believe in something sort of like irrationally?
Zealous.
What's that?
Zealous.
No, no, it's like, anyway, I can't think of the word, but, yeah, your beliefs with you're talking about your family and their limited belief structure. So maybe you want to just go from there.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it always feels like having a container that really restricts you from really wanting to grow and really feeling that nourishment of like them encouraging, yeah, that's okay to grow in a different way, to think things really differently, to really question and be curious. Because anything not traditional, not what customs are, not what um, the obedient daughter does, then therefore you're not seen. Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And so for you as an Asian woman in the psychedelic space, which I briefly touched upon, is a sort of like you know, historically in the Western world dominated by white, white old men, um, and has, you know, mostly been extracted on the backs of of elder indigenous women and other men, and in indigenous societies. So like for you as a woman of color in that space, how do you find um how do you find the experience of practicing in a space with you know, these protocols they develop, these molecules you develop, and you can speak to it as much or as little as you wish, because we all understand that there are sensitivities around some of these treatments, but you can at least speak to um, preparation and integration, if you want to, and then I'll let you choose how you speak to the rest of the story. But yeah, how has your experience been in this space, which is it's a novel space in and of itself, really, in this third wave of you know, renaissance of psychedelics.
Mhm. Very good question. Um, it's been very interesting to see more people of color and Asians in psychedelic circles and spaces. Because prior, when I really first got into this type of work, was through training, and even then, I was the only Asian female there.
Mm,
Everyone else was white,
mm.
and so
And yeah,
yeah.
please tell more.
No, 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 go
Please say
ahead.
more. Yeah, yeah. And so that experience of not even being othered, but just being like, wow, I am the only white person here, or only not white person here.
Mhm,
Never mind the only Asian woman.
mhm,
You know, it's like subsets of subsets. And then on top of that, you're also mm, you've also had some changes in your life in the recent past, and maybe you want to speak to those evolutions of yourself as well as being an Asian woman in this space.
yeah. Okay. So throughout my different therapy practices, like what David has shared, I do music therapy. I do somatic experiencing therapy work. I use a lot of many different modalities, like hypnosis as well, just to get access to these altered conscious states. And I find that the more I leaned into that kind of curiosity and work, psychedelics kind of found me because I was hearing more about the potential of what it can do, how it can help. And then I started really reading, wanting to learn more. And then magically a spot opened up last minute. And because it was really hard to get into a training, especially hands on. And they called me and said, "Hey, would you like a spot last minute opened up?" And I was like, "Okay, when is it?" 2 weeks from now. I'm like, "Oh, not a lot of time to plan, but okay, let's make this happen." And like that really changed
And
my
is
life.
that like you? Is that something that you would normally do? Is be you know, impulsive like that and just be like, go?
No.
Okay, so why this time? Why this like, okay, I'm gonna go to drug camp. I'm gonna learn how to do all of the psychedelics all in 1 week, and I'm gonna do it in 2 weeks and have never have done anything before. Because you had you done drugs before that point? Had you tried anything either like, you know, therapeutically or recreationally?
No, so like I said, I
up
grew up
until that point?
very traditional and religious household. So drugs were seen really bad and that I would die and I would disgrace and dishonor the family. So I did none of that until literally that
Hmm.
training camp. I did almost everything underneath the sun that you can think of in about a 10-day training. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a lot.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay, so tell. I mean, you know, tell, don't tell. I mean, it's up to you. It's your story. You know, you can tell. You can be as conservative as you want, or as open as you want. But tell us more. Like, what was that experience like? Can you say what place you went to, or do you want to? You know, give us some details. Give some
yeah,
juicy details. Come on. I like being on this side of the things. It's fun. You're normally interviewing and I'm editing in the back room. Now you're on the hot seat, baby.
so I was training at an island, and um, I just remember what two things that really, really moved me that I just couldn't explain in that moment was how when the time came, I had to take my medicine or the substances for my big hero ceremony. I could feel how present all the fear, the shame, the guilt, the oh no, I'm like the horrible bad daughter that will shame the family and disgrace the Poon heritage
But they
line.
did they didn't like you bringing home the tattooed fake Asian.
No, no, they didn't
That's
like
for sure. No. I wore long sleeves for the first 6 months of interactions with her parents. And then finally she's like, it's 30 degrees and we're in Langley at my sister's house. You can't wear jeans and a long sleeve dress shirt. You're gonna die. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. It's okay. And she's like, you're gonna die. And I was literally dying dying of heat exhaustion in the house to the point where I had to go to the car for AC brakes. And then the next time I was like, okay, fine, I'll just wear a t-shirt. And I showed up and they were like, oh, like immediately deflated and depressed. And then just like everything was bad. Anyway, that was totally not the point of the story. Joni, continue.
Yeah, so at that training, in that moment, I was like that fear was so present, all that negative self-talk and the shame. Oh, that the shame. Was just so present in that moment. And then to actually say yes to my two facilitators and handing me substances and taking it took a lot of bravery on my end and trust because I really didn't know these two guides because we all just met 3, 4 days ago as part of this training.
Mm. Now, I've heard this before from other practitioners, and I don't really consider myself to be a facilitator in so much as like you are, or other people are like Agandeus. Um, but I'll hold space in a group and in DMT ceremony for sure with confidence, and I will second here and there when necessary, when people with hire Lucinar and the practitioners that we work with to do guidance um, for one-to-one journeying. And but that said, the I've heard from other people who have done these trainings or these big um, experiential developmental professional development if you will in the psychedelic space. They form these real bonds, these real true bonds with many of the people that they learn with. And is that something that that you can speak to? Did you develop any like lifelong connections with people at that workshop or that
Mhm.
training?
Yeah, so at that workshop, I met this lovely woman who didn't know who I was. And then I was trying to figure out how to get to this island for training because at that time it was when there was a lot of airstrikes. So there was no way of getting there unless you wanted to spend $2,000 for something local. And I was like, I'm not spending $2,000. And then so she said, oh, hey, I'm driving. Would you like to carpool and then chip in for gas? I'm like, sure. And so she picked me up and we carpooled all the way there. And that was our very first time meeting each other.
Mhm.
And then we were there. And then we all we had to pick our little triad cohorts. So that would
Mhm.
be our learning group as we switch from therapist to client, client to therapist. And so happened that when we were picking out randomly which triads that we would be in, she was one of my triad people.
Mhm. And and you guys are still close, didn't and still very very good friends, are you not?
Yeah, we are very, very, very close friends. Still up to now, we stay really closely in touch with each other's lives. And yeah,
Mhm.
we often check up on each other.
Yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful observation, to make is in that in this pattern of people creating lifelong connections through educational experiences in psychedelics, because that's really what you do when Lucinor hires you for to facilitate events. Um, Lucinor provides the psychedelic molecules for those events, and then you are there to curate the event itself. And in that synergy of creating a meaningful experience, like your educational experience, at drug camp, as I like to call it, the what you call it, the don't do it. Don't lose your mind. Don't lose your thought. Yeah, the synergistic effect of the molecules that are weaved into your events and workshops that you come up with, and that you lead and curate and facilitate so beautifully. Like, tell me more about that synergy.
Yeah, so I think what's so fascinating about working with these, like I like to call them the substances, psychedelics, as psychospiritual technologies, because at the end of the day, these are like tools. If you really learn how to cultivate and set intention behind how you use these tools, the more you'll get out of it.
Mm,
And um, I am a really strong believer that not always do we always understand things that offset us or things that our trauma doesn't know how to fully express because there aren't words and maybe there's no narrative. And then through the somatics, I find that that's when you really drop into remembering and healing. And so when I was able to test the different strains or different combinations of these medicines like DMT, like NMX-5, MEO-DMT, there's a certain somatic sensation because I'm so used to working with my body, I can notice the subtleties.
mhm.
And then oftentimes these little subtle somatic sensations or responses correlate to different emotions or thoughts.
And so in those experiences where um, you know we're mutually holding space, and sometimes we're holding space with other facilitators as well, or other angels if they're helping. Some of the events can be pretty big. We've had events up to 40 people, totally sold out, and it's a little unwieldy to do the bigger events, but they are energetically very synergistic and beautiful. But my preference is actually I like 6 to 10 people in an event, more intimate. It's really beautiful to experience that for example, in your sound bath, which I've spoken to before. It's not a sound bath; it's so much more than a sound bath. It is an odyssey through music and song. It's beautiful. Um, but I won't digress. So in those places where people are meeting and sharing space in those workshops, community is built, and that's essentially what's happened to you in your educational psychedelic experiences. Community was built, and so when we educate people and we give them that sort of autonomy, we create autonomous, not just individuals, but communities that are self-sustaining and self-supporting and that are like pods here and there. I fucking love Rick. Rick is amazing. He's like the Jedi. There he is, Rick Luna. Yeah, I love it. He's like the Jedi in the background with the lightsabers and the nunchucks. It looks like you're rocking out to some serious music right now, Rick.
Thanks.
Anyway,
Yeah, feeling good. Have some
uh,
killer energy
good.
going on this morning.
Amazing. I love the fractal behind you. It's very beautiful. And so are you. Anywho, but so in like when we're building these communities, these pods, like it's not just the drugs, as I like to call them, that are creating this connection. It's these events, it's the education, it's the learning that's creating those connections and those lasting, meaningful relationships that transcend medicine or drugs, right? So maybe you could speak to like the growing community of psychedelics in both the little tiny puddle of Lucinor and in Vancouver itself. There's several other communities like Flying Sage and Gathering Group and Sisters in Psychedelics and the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, all these different things. But maybe you can speak to these like growing communities and how you think that these events can sort of like engender that medicine, which is connection.
Yeah, it's so important because when you start doing a lot of this work, because it's just so new, and especially when you're creating something that hadn't been really done in the past, then you're really
Mm.
creating and pioneering new protocols. And so it's so important when we have these kind of collective people with mutual interests and passion in wanting and being curious so that we can like, okay, how? Because, we live in a society that doesn't give us a lot of space where we can take 2, 3 days to process things and to feel and then process some more and then take your time to slowly integrate back. Like some people have two jobs, they're moms, dads. And so how can we make it in a way that people can still drop into those beautiful psychedelic spaces without having to blast off?
Yeah, cool. That's amazing. There was a question that I missed earlier from Lynette. It says, Joni, please tell us how psychedelic integration therapy is different than regular therapy. I'd love to hear how the process is different. Psychedelic journeys bring up deep childhood traumas for me. I personally find it difficult to explain how these memories pop up in my head to therapists who are not trained in integration therapy. Side note, I'm finding it difficult in the US to find therapists willing to work with clients who sit with illegal medicines, anything other than ketamine. So yeah, I can speak just to the last bit of that, on a practical note, is that yeah, for example, Joni has lots of clients that she does integration work and therapy work over Zoom, something that was established during COVID, but has sort of made markets bigger. We have couples therapy every month. And most of the time we do it through Zoom, and I thought it was kind of silly at first, but it's been totally effective. So that's something that Joni could help you with. She's not super great at plugging herself, so I'm going to do it for her. RainorShineTherapy.com. That's Joni's practice for music therapy and for psychotherapy. So go check her out. She is fully licensed RCC, specialized in psychedelics. So, Joni, do you want to talk about how psychedelic therapy is different from therapy?
So let's answer your question, Lynette, about psychedelic integration therapy. How it's different from regular therapy is like oftentimes you're working with a therapist who has quite a deep knowledge and experience working with substances, not only working with people, but they themselves have done their own work and they themselves have experienced it. Because how can you support and navigate? And of course, there are differences. No journey is alike. And even if you're the same person taking the same substance, no journey is alike still. And so there's so many variables, and it's just so beautiful to see how all that can come together.
Mm-hmm. Um, and thank you for that. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Um, oh wait, so she was yeah. So and so oh yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So for every single type of molecule that you're comfortable working with your clients, you have personally experienced it yourself
Correct. In a therapeutic setting.
in a
Yes.
therapeutic setting.
Yeah. So
So what I hear you saying is that I can tell your parents that you do drugs.
all the time. Yes, that is correct.
Can I interject for a second? I just have a follow-up. Um,
Absolutely.
Thank you. Um, so I tried ketamine therapy when I first started trying psychedelic therapies, and I went to a ketamine clinic in Seattle. It is legal here. And I asked the therapists who were sitting with me when I was, doing the medicine,
Mm.
have you experienced this? And
Mhm.
they said no.
Oh,
I said, how can you possibly know what I'm going through right now if you've
Yeah,
never tried it? I mean, have you tried any kind of psychedelics? And they said no. And I said, I
amazing.
was just shocked, and I couldn't believe it. I to this day, and I've known other people who've gone to that same clinic, and they're like,
Mm.
there are nurse practitioners, and they
Mhm.
don't do the medicine. In fact, one
Mhm.
of them asked me if they knew where I could source psilocybin because
Amazing.
they had never done psilocybin. And I was like, you're asking me, and I'm here for therapy. I
Mm.
couldn't believe it. So
That's amazing.
that's where we are in the
Yeah.
United States. It's really
Well,
a sad situation.
I mean, I think it varies depending on where you are in the United States, for
I'm
one,
in
because the different,
Seattle, and it should be a
yeah,
lot more
yeah,
open, but
it should be, but it's getting there. It's just that it's, in like for example, in California, like the people want it, the congressmen want it, the senators want it, everybody wants it. The U.S. military defense bill was approved for psychedelic integration, bipartisan. So it's not like everybody doesn't want it. It's just that the political and power structures of the United States are very complex, um, and and it's difficult to medicalize something that's been to legalize through medicalization something that has been so prohibited, like Schedule 1 narcotics, for so long. And so like it's difficult. It takes time. It takes time, but it's happening.
So
It's moving in the
when
right
I finally
direction.
did find a therapist that would work with me, she worked in a ketamine clinic and
Hmm.
she had tried other psychedelics.
That's
And
amazing. Yeah,
a ketamine does not work for me. In fact, ketamine depresses me, and I'm
yeah,
dealing with depression and PTSD and a lot of childhood trauma.
sure.
Psilocybin seems to be the only thing that actually works for me. But
Mm,
finding a therapist in the US that will work with someone
yeah,
who is self-administering psilocybin
yeah,
seems to be a challenge.
yeah.
So that's why I come onto forums like this and get to know
Hmm.
people because I need to network on my own because it's really difficult. There's not like a list of therapists that will work with people who
Yeah.
self-administer medications
Well,
that are not
yeah,
legal.
yeah, I agree. And sort of therein lies the rub. So what you are doing is exactly what I was talking about in before by hour. You are taking autonomy over your relationship with your effective dosing of psychedelics. And that's why Joni's, protocol is so genius because it's what's necessary. In the ancient past, which I can speak to because I'm an archaeologist by education. Um, it was the priest class that controlled psychedelics in most societies, in almost all societies. There was at least some ritual in some sort of pagan, spiritual, religious form, or not so pagan form that because the Christians did it too. Um, that these rituals. Oh my gosh, what was I saying? Yeah, and these there's always some ritual in psychedelics, and that, oh no, I've lost my train of thought. Darn it, sorry. um Joni, can you help me out there? What was the question from Lynette? The
Oh,
priest
just
class. Oh yes,
you're
the
right.
priest class. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you have this priest class, and thank you so much. And they control access to psychedelics. And we sort of have that happening now, you know. Aldous Huxley also believed the same thing, like in the 60s in the Cultural Revolution. He's like, he tried mescaline, he's like, this stuff we can't give to average person, like this has got to be reserved for the intellectuals and the elite. Um, People can't have this. And so you have this class of people that becomes like the guides, the servers, the shamans, even though I really 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 dislike that word, to the point where I say almost hate that word. You can only be a shaman if you're from Siberia, so I don't see a lot of Siberians around here, and I see a lot of shamans, a lot of great white shamans. And it's like it's kind of kind of a strange thing, but anyway,
Well,
digress.
to have access to a lot of these medicines, a lot of people start their own churches here in the
Mm.
United States.
Yeah, I've seen that several times. Uh, what is her name? Oh, she started a church in Atlanta recently. Um, I was just
Because that's
talking
the
to
only
her.
way that you can legally
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
administer these medicines
Yeah, I mean,
in the United
that's a great
States.
thing. That's a great thing about the constitutions is that they do enshrine rights that can be enabled for things that they weren't intended for. But that's a sort that goes both ways. You get the right to carry arms, and you also have the right to do drugs religiously. So there you go. It can go both ways. And but yeah, it is a neat thing to see people in that context. It's much harder to do that in Canada than in the United States. We're a little bit more strict about I guess what the government recognizes as religion because of the amount of power that religions can have by being tax exempt and all sorts of other things. Um, but yeah,
But I think
Thank you.
in Canada, I think the openness to be able to be a psychedelic integration therapist like Joni,
Mhm.
to have that title to be able to work with people, it's a little bit easier legally in Canada, is it not? Joni,
Joni,
what do you?
Joni, when you want to speak to that,
Mhm.
into the
Um,
intricacies of that?
yeah, so I've been taught that just for legality, of course, you don't say you are a psychedelic therapist where you serve substances or as part of your session. It's more like you're using, oh, preparation for psychedelics or integration for psychedelics. That's like a way around it. And then so people who say that they do preparatory or integration work, most likely they also have more deeper knowledge in that other kind of work. If you're wanting to work with them specifically, like with medicine as well. Does
Mhm.
that answer your question?
Yes, that's it's challenging to find anyone who will even say the word psilocybin or whatever if they're working with you as a therapist in the United States, I've found, you know. And the one therapist that I did find, unfortunately, she retired recently,
Mm.
so I'm therapist-less at this point. But so that's I'm kind of fishing around trying to figure out, you know, how do you find therapists that are familiar with psychedelics and are open to working with you? Is there a list in Canada that you can is there, you know, I don't know. Everything just seems so underground and it's just really sad to me, you
Mhm.
know.
There there is a directory that we can pull up. Babe, do you have access to the third wave psychedelic directory? Is that something you can
I
pull up
am not
easily?
familiar with that.
Yeah.
So,
So there are directories of therapists that are both like above and underground, I suppose. And that to like both licensed and unlicensed therapists in the psychedelic area that have like profiles on a directory on the Third Wave website. And the Third Wave has a podcast called the Psychedelic Podcast, and yeah, they connect people, and so that you can find people, and you know there's people like you, like we have a lot of clients that fly in from other places to Vancouver to you know be solo guided through Lucinor consultants, and yeah, and so Joni,
Thank
did
you
you want
for
to?
addressing that issue. I appreciate that. And I was not aware of third wave, but I'll look up some information. Oh, thank you.
yeah, I just
Thanks,
Yeah,
posted.
Joni.
amazing,
Awesome. Thank you.
amazing. Yeah. Thanks so much for the questions, Lana. It's so much, you know, an hour is actually a long time. I was like, I rambled my way through it all. Okay, good. Figured out how to fill it up, but it is a long time. And so it's, yeah. Do people want to chat? Questions for Joni?
Just really quickly to touch back on Lucinor, are you the person on the other end of the chat there?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, all roads lead to me for now. It's not a multinational corporation yet.
Great. No, and you know, more power to you. And the website is fab, and I popped
Thank you.
onto the chat. So when there's a moment there, I'm a little hesitant to leave contact information, but that's just me. And again,
I
that kind
got
of
it.
reflects the, you know, the atmosphere that was being spoken of just now. But at the same time, I, you know, again, just the implications of something like the third wave, even as a branding or marketing kind of node.
Hmm.
I just really
Hmm.
appreciate the trend that that things are going in this way, because it's you know, I had a conversation with somebody recently, and it was in this therapeutic context, specifically regarding how in in a lot of our, you know, a lot of our nation's history, a lot of these things were um considered subversive, and then they were promulgated as subversions. And what's happening now, I believe, is much more integrative and much more uplifting. And so much less divisive, so much less interested in creating an us and a them, and much more interested in creating an openness and an opportunity. So again, I really appreciate all the comments, and Lynette, you know, and being in Washington, it's neat that we have these opportunities to even have these conversations in the quote unquote above ground. Um, and I know that it is as more and more people in the certified therapeutic kind of settings are educated about these kinds of things, because I've had to educate some of my folks that I work with about my personal regimen, and the fact that they're willing to on board with that, and that I found alignment there is has been surprising to me. I went into it with a little bit of trepidation, and then I was really actually quite surprised to find people that were, and a lot of it kind of like and I'm not a really huge fan of Michael Pollan, but there's doors opening through some of these areas, and at the same time, it is very frustrating when you're working with a clinician who refuses to undergo the experience, and at the same time is responsible for administering the integration. So I resonate with your sentiment there.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're just wrapping up here. I just want to thank Leo for hosting and taking care of all this, and for doing an amazing job. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for listening. I was like 7 a.m. on a Sunday, who the fuck's gonna be there? But hey, look at all you beautiful people. That's amazing. And Joni, did you want to sign off? So I just wanted to say thanks again, and you're amazing.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been such a pleasure to share my story, and I enjoy answering some of the questions. They were really good ones. Yeah, I didn't know. So
Yeah, and if you want to follow us, if you want to follow Lucinor, you can follow Lucinor on at Lucinor _ on Instagram, and then Joni's Rain or Shine Therapy on Instagram, and then she's on TikTok. She has an educational TikTok on psychedelics, and it's called Boo Boo. What's it called?
Psychedelic Fairy.
The Psychedelic Fairy, and there's a E and three instead of an E in psychedelic. Anyway, and the link for our podcast I dropped in the chat. So if you want to scroll up, you can find it. It's called Hot Pot, and you can listen to Joni there. And all of our interesting guests that we have, which will also include Adam Aranovich and Chris Timmerman in the near future. So thank you so much, and ciao.
So we are here at the end of our last moderator for the 24 hours. It has been an emotional and improving event, in that I think it has improved the nature of our universe by sharing so many diverse voices and really deep thinking that the moderators have put forward and shared in their stories and in their conversation. We just want to thank everyone who's been part of this, everyone who's supported it. We really appreciate the movement, and we just love all the people asking questions and having different perspectives and allowing one another to disagree and all those wonderful things. So Kai is our last moderator. Just want to thank him for closing this ceremony for us. And Kai, take it away. It's your hour.
All right.
People asking questions
Yeah.
and having different perspectives and allowing one another to disagree and all those wonderful things. So
Hey, everybody. Sorry, I just opened the YouTube and then the voiceover started to go through. I thought maybe I would just start with a little bit of an introduction about myself, and then we can kind of see what folks are, if what folks are interested in discussing. I could talk about, really different things for hours and hours. But as most of you probably saw in my little bio, I'm a naturopathic and Chinese medicine doctor, and I'm here in Seattle, Washington. And the sort of really exciting direction that I'm taking my practice right now, in collaboration with some colleagues, is the integration of psychedelic medicine with traditional, with in particular Chinese medicine, but traditional understandings of the body, of human experience, of consciousness, and really bringing those together. So taking the medical knowledge that I've gained over the years, from both the Western side via naturopathic medicine, as well as the Eastern side via Chinese medicine, and really applying that to psychedelic therapy and working to individualize approaches. And so right now in my clinic, we're mostly working with ketamine because it's legal. But we are anticipating and sort of starting to explore, the other possibilities, especially here in Washington, with the push to legalize psilocybin mushrooms, and with the possibility of MDMA being legalized later this year. Those are all medicines that we're really excited to engage with. But for right now, it is kind of been focused around ketamine. So I've been working to, develop a deeper understanding and a model of these therapeutic substances, that incorporates like models of consciousness from other systems of medicine, in particular Chinese medicine, because it's really, Chinese medicine has a really long history and thousands of years of experience with, millions of people. And they have a model for human consciousness, which I think is one of the big things that we don't have a good grasp on coming from the Western side of things. So I would say that's kind of a general overview of where I'm at with respect to psychedelic medicine. We could get into some of the understanding of consciousness and kind of what's happening with psychedelics, if we translate it and we could incorporate it with like Chinese medicine theory, so we can like understand things like like putting side effects in context, for example, being able to predict who is going to struggle with a particular psychedelic and maybe not have a good experience versus who it's like really, really meant for, who like might really benefit, but they need more preparation, and that preparation could be like, mental, emotional preparation, but it could also just be physical or nutritional or biochemical, right? We know about the interaction of like psychiatric medication with psychedelics, but I'm talking, much further beyond that. How do we prepare someone so that they have the transformation that we're all kind of, talking about? We can certainly talk a little bit about like body response, like what is the perspective and context that we think about medicine as a whole, because I think that like there are different understandings of how medicine works, like what's the interaction between medicine and the body, and coming again from the Western perspective, we're kind of steeped in the drug approach, but that's not the only way medicine works. And mostly I do, low dose homeopathy, herbal medicine. I do a lot of acupuncture, and all of those are working differently with the body, compared to the way that pharmaceuticals work, right? Which is kind of how in the West we think about medicine. We're like, oh, it's like drugs, but it's not always like that. So yeah, I mean, maybe at this point, we can open it up a little bit if anyone has questions, if anyone has thoughts about, like just things that they've been considering, topics of interest. I wanted to, see what folks are interested in. Does anyone want to chime in? And we're not a super huge group, so I think people can kind of just, unmute and speak up.
I'm gonna jump in. I keep jumping in. It's so sorry. But here I am anyway.
Great.
I'm curious if you would speak to a little bit about your experience in observing or personal experience in the effects of ketamine on like the language centers.
Sure, sure. And I'm going to kind of interpret that a little broadly, both with respect to, right, with like respect to speech, and respect to like speaking, but also just like language in general. And I'm kind of gonna, we'll kind of bring in a little bit of like Chinese medicine understanding here, because to me, the main thing that ketamine does is it pulls a person into the imaginal realm. So, you know, I think for people who have had personal experience with ketamine, it can be very dreamlike. Um, and the dream state is when our soul decouples from the body and enters into a different realm, right? So you could call it the astral, you could call it the imaginal realm, you could call it like dream time or dream world. But what ketamine does is it kind of detaches the aspect of a person that is concerned with their inner experience, which I think, you know, in a lot of traditions is called the soul. And then the soul wanders. It moves into a space where it's not as bound by, you know, like time and physical space. And things can become more imaginary, you know, like we can start to have experiences that like you wouldn't be able to have when you're like here in your three-dimensional physical body. And I think with respect to language, language, right? Like language is present in the imaginal realm, but it does not define the imaginal realm. It's just an aspect of the imaginal realm. Um, and so the, you know, certainly like when people have taken a large amount of ketamine and are in the ketamine experience, like they're not talking, you know? And so any like sort of immediate effect on like language centers, like it's not that people necessarily lose language in the sense that like you enter a space where there is no language, but that the language starts, right? Like your language is the association of language is a sort of abstraction, right? You associate, you have these words that you associate with experiences. And so language is like a map. And just as, right, different languages have different words for the same experience, like maps can shift. And so when you go into the imaginal realm, like your maps can change, right? Like maybe the word, like you had a very strong association with a particular word, and now that you are abstracted from your physical reality and like kind of moved into a different realm of experience, that word can take on different meanings for you. And in general, this is the power of ketamine, is to like give you a different perspective on something which previously for you had been very fixed, which is why it's so great, you know, especially for PTSD, you know, for things that are like stuck and rigid and locked in the body, and you have this very fixed experience. When you take the ketamine and it pulls you out of that experience, all of a sudden you can see it in a different way, you know, right? And so in that same way, maybe you get a different, you can like access a different language for your experience, or you might, you know, have a different experience of particular words or you know, language that you know, previously was very rigid. Does that kind of answer your question? personally,
Yeah,
yeah,
I in my personal experience, I find that like my inner monologue is you know, there's moments where I can notice my inner monologue not being present without actually reactivating it, which for me is just a huge relief in and of itself. Um, and at the same time, you know, what you said about the associative nature versus the abstracted nature and the ability to kind of like have those things in a different space definitely rings true. I've been um you know, I've got a whatever how many ever day streak on Duolingo, and it's a very very different experience. Like when I've like forgotten to do it, and all of a sudden I'm like trying to do it while I'm, you know, in that space, and it's strangely revelatory in terms of like how just as you're saying, like different languages have different words for different similar experiences that we experience as people. They have different words, and then there's also syntax, and you know, at the same time also just my own personal work with like journaling and that kind of thing, looking at the way that my ability to compose thoughts into writing. And these are all just kind of like personal. They're nothing that I recommend or anything like that, but just in terms of like personal novelty, uh, sometimes I end up going down that rabbit hole a little bit and just kind of like being a little astounded. And then over the long term, just as you know, just as was said previously, so eloquently by, and I don't want to call him by, I don't remember his name exactly, but he's here on as Tiger Dad. But speaking to the speaking to the ability to notice that you've got this neurological pathway that's been, you know, the one that's, I don't want to say burned in, but the one that's been habituated, and then the actual capacity to see the fork in the road, you know, the lightning strike with the forks, and be able to actually have a moment of agency in order to choose to go down a different set of neurological responses to any given kind of situation. And again, like the language and the response to certain, you know, not to say triggers, but language can in fact be triggers. Words can evoke emotion, and to be able to have, you know, even a small degree of agency over the the participation of my own systems within that space as I interact with others, that sometimes, you know, that would otherwise be challenging, has become um something that I can actually have gratitude during, and like, you know, be able to express myself rather than kind of going into a freeze flight fawn kind of, you know, response. So anyway, that's, I appreciate your comments there.
yeah. It's, you know, I think that's what psychedelics do. Maybe this is like a interesting segue into psychedelics sort of more in general. Um, you know, I think you can parse different psychedelics in different ways, but all of them, right, all of them promote an altered state of consciousness where you can access a different, you know, a different experience, a different way of thinking, a different perspective. Um, and right, that lets you, right, that this sort of gets into the discussion around neuroplasticity and, you know, like shifting, right, like these sort of, you know, mental or neurologic pathways, but you get an opportunity to maybe do things a little differently than you would do habitually. And specifically with ketamine, it's giving you, and this I think is actually a really interesting and important like distinction that is not made easily in a Western conventional model or like understanding of consciousness, because we haven't really explored consciousness, whereas a lot of, you know, Eastern medical systems and Eastern religions and Eastern science, like consciousness is what we are looking at. And so there's been a lot more like research into types of consciousness. But for ketamine, what's being sort of unbound is the quality of imagination, which in Chinese medicine is associated with the Hun spirit, which physically is housed in the liver. So there's this integration between consciousness and the physical body. And this is the ability to dream. This is the ability to imagine. And in the way that most dreams, sort of a standard dream state, it's not like you may have some awareness that you're dreaming, but it is simply just a different type of experience that a person is having. And this is different from what in Chinese medicine we call spirit or Shen. And that's associated with the heart and is really about the light of consciousness, the awareness. So in the same way that like you can be dreaming and then you can become aware that you are dreaming, right? The dream is your Hun spirit, it's your imaginal spirit. The awareness that you're dreaming, that's your Shen, that's your consciousness, which is more associated with light. And this kind of brings up differences between different psychedelics because some, like ketamine, releases your Hun, your imagination, and kind of allows you to imagine a different reality for yourself. But something like psilocybin or LSD increases your spirit, your consciousness. It makes you more aware. And that's actually different. And what you see, I mean, this is like, right, like everyone who's had personal experiences, like they're very different substances. So this kind of just is a little bit of a taste of like, I think where, we get really powerful models from other types of medicine. Kind of going back to something that Leo wrote a few minutes ago about basal ganglion blocks. I am not very knowledgeable about like neurological approaches or information about neurobiology or neurophysiology. That's really not my strong suit. What I could say about things at a neurological level is that my mental model, my model and understanding for, especially for this type of medicine, is very much that consciousness comes first. And for anyone who is familiar with, Eastern religions, this is kind of how it works, is the physical world is a manifestation of our consciousness. And so that doesn't mean that you can't affect consciousness through the physical, but, there is this back and forth, right? There's like a back and forth between the mental or the level of consciousness, the immaterial, and the, physical reality, and where they influence each other. But I think this is, to me, one of the areas in which like the Western model of consciousness goes wrong, which is that, the mainstream understanding is that consciousness arises from like what's happening at the physical level. Like you get consciousness by, like the firings of your nerves and like the relationships between your neurons, and that, consciousness is a bottom-up phenomenon that is like like it emerges from what's happening at a physical or chemical level. And I think that is not correct. And there are some interesting examples of how that doesn't really, like there are people that sort of show that that's not correct, that sort of prove that wrong. But that consciousness is consciousness, right? So again, like there's the light of consciousness, which is awareness, right? That's top down. That is existing independent of a physical substrate. And so I think this is like one of these areas where the theory and like the metaphysical approach is important to keep in mind. Again, it doesn't mean that what we do at a physical level or what we do at a chemical level, and we take these psychedelic medicines, like of course that is having an impact on consciousness. That's like why we're all here. Other kind of things that popped up in the chat.
I have a question, if I
Yeah,
may.
absolutely.
I joined your talk a little late, so forgive me if you've already mentioned this. But in terms of, I love how you describe navigating the moment and the difference, everything involved in one of these experiences. My question is around afterwards. I know, for me, in my experience, integration can last like days and weeks and months and years even. And besides an integration therapist, what would you recommend someone do to continue to integrate the experience, to continue to cultivate the embodiment that was given to them during the experience, just as a person, like without involving other people or money or anything? What would you recommend for integration, for continued integration for years and months and years to come? Thank you.
That's a really good question. And, I think it's going to be individual, right? Just as each person's experience is individual, like what they personally need for integration is also going to be individual. And we can kind of go in order and look at like the different levels, the different types. Like if we just start purely at the level of the physical body, we integrate experience physically through movement. And so, when someone has some kind of experience that shakes them up or that brings up a lot of emotion, movement is almost always very helpful. And it can be as simple as just going on a walk, right? Like making sure that you get regular movement, and especially at those times when you're having a strong internal experience, to get up and move, I think is really critical. And again, like usually that's just walking. It's not about like going and getting fit or like doing any kind of intense exercise. It's just, not being like at home, like on the bed, on the couch and inactive. Other physical body types of things are any kind of body work, any kind of therapy that is touch oriented, whether that is massage or chiropractic. There's all kinds of somatic therapies now where it's like both touch and talk therapy kind of together. Some people might find more structured movement like dance or martial arts to be very helpful. Yep, I see Rick waving there. Right, so these sorts of engaging with the physical body, I think, is extremely important. And there's a concept in Chinese medicine that you always treat an issue from the opposite end of the spectrum. So when you have like a physical issue, when you have physical pain, when you have organ dysfunction, you treat the psychological level, you treat the mental, emotional level. When you have mental health struggles, when you have anxiety, when you have depression, when you have insomnia, like these things that are more like immaterial, you treat the body, you treat the physical body, right? It's the other end of the pole. And so I think one of the things that happens, right, with consciousness focused medicine is we kind of stay up in the head and we're like thinking about it all the time, and you have to get into your body, right? I mean, even what you said is like there's this experience of being in the body in a different way that often happens with psychedelics. And so continuing to engage with the body, I think, is a extremely critical component. So that's like, right, physical level. And then at a, at a emotional level, this is going to be so individual. Maybe emotionally, what needs to happen is expression, right? There's like emotion that is stirred up. And this great example from like, trauma work, PTSD, is the psychedelic experience stirs up emotions that have been held in the body for a long time, and now they need to move, they need to come out. And, maybe that's therapy, maybe that's counseling, maybe that is artistic expression, right? Like art, doing art, doing some kind of creative process. Maybe that is, and that creativity, could be drawing, it could be singing, it could be sculpting, it could be making something. Maybe that is simply like sitting in your car, going out to the woods and like screaming at the top of your lungs for, 15 minutes every day, right? Like you do that every day for a month. I mean, sometimes like that's what people need. And like, there are avenues of expression that I think people don't realize are available. And I have a friend who would take a baseball bat and go into the woods and beat on tree stumps with the baseball bat as a form of expression. So these sorts of, right, like that's also about movement, right? That's emotional movement. At the mental level, I've personally found that, yeah, certainly, I think Lynette, I saw put journaling into the chat. I think journaling is definitely like a great way to process, especially for people who are processing at the like at the level of language, right? At the level of words. So that's kind of, dovetailing into the sort of artistic expression, but, needing to like speak or like describe an experience is different than needing to like draw or needing to like rage about something. But words, so journaling, there's also a lot of different like contemplative practices, right? And at that mental level, it might be really helpful to start investigating, wisdom traditions, ancient wisdom, right? There's so many different lineages of spiritual wisdom that people can contemplate. And so I think at the mental level, that's what I find to be very helpful is contemplation, right? So that you're not just spinning out in your own experience, thinking about your own bullshit over and over and over. You have something that you can like use your mind to focus on. And that's typically, right, like writings. I mean, I could give some examples if people are interested of different systems and stuff that I personally have found helpful, but I think at a mental level, and then social relational level, right? Like finding groups of people or looking for people who've had similar experiences to you so that you can have, someone to connect to, especially, right? Like, these sorts of experiences can be very disorienting and like isolating because all of a sudden you're having this experience and like all your family and friends, like they can't relate to you, you can't relate to them. You start to lose that connection. So it's really, really important to have people in your life that you can relate to about this experience, that you can integrate with. I think that's really, really, that's like very crucial. Humans are social animals. We do not do well being isolated. And so having people to like process with, I think is a really, really critical, component of integration. And then, there are, I would say like one more level would be like a spiritual level. And this can be any kind of practice that appeals, right? Spiritual practices can be, I mean, really common are like, right, like breath work. There's a lot of chanting traditions. Personally, I'm not super into that. There's all kinds of different like meditative practices that people can do, but I would say like maybe just like meditation as a general umbrella term for some kind of spiritual practice, maybe prayer, right, kind of falls into that category. I think that can be very, very key, especially because, right, like a psychedelic experience, it typically it's opening, right? It makes you see the world in a different way, which is typically bigger. You have a larger or broader perspective, and the general like nature of spiritual practices is to like expand your consciousness, to broaden your perspective, which is also a lot of what psychedelics do. So, but you can't and you don't want to be doing psychedelics every day. And so, having a spiritual practice of some kind, I find, is also very, very helpful.
Thank you. That was really thorough and great. Yeah, if there's time before you leave, after other questions, I would be interested in hearing about the spiritual systems you said that have helped you. Thanks again.
All right. Let's see. Any other questions that are popping up in people's minds right this minute? Otherwise, I can go back to a few things that came up in the chat earlier.
I had asked about the differences for culture or ethnicity or race, like how it applies for you in your work with patients.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you always have to meet people where they're at. And ultimately, like, their lived experience being a member of a particular ethnicity or coming from a certain culture, that's part of where they're at. And so sometimes it doesn't really matter, and sometimes it's extremely critical. With something like diet, for example. You can't, like, if someone has, their cultural diet that they've been eating, and I perceive that like something about that is contributing to their illness, right? Like that's a really important and very sensitive conversation that we have to have, to tell someone that they can't like eat the food that they grew up eating, right? Like it's a key part of that conversation, with respect to psychedelics, kind of the concept of consciousness. Like, how do you talk about consciousness when people are coming from different cultural backgrounds? You just have to find like what is going to make sense to that person. Like some people, some cultures don't really have concepts for like mental health issues that we take for granted here in America. And so if I'm talking to someone like that, well, first of all, like if they're coming to me, they probably aren't using those words, like they're describing their issues in different terminology. And so we're going to stay in that terminology. And that is one of the big advantages of Chinese medicine and systems of medicine that have full integration between the physical and the psycho-emotional, is that you can always speak of one or the other because they reflect each other, right? Like everybody kind of understands the experience of, I have a stomach ache. What they're really saying is I'm anxious, but what comes out of the mouth is I have a stomach ache, right? Or like I have a headache. It's not I'm stressed, it's I have a headache. So it's easy to, and like the physical body is like a common.
Then when they get home, they
Right.
may eat dinner or they buy dinner and they closed off.
It's the physical body is a common denominator for everybody, no matter what the culture is. You know, like talking about something happening physically, especially when it's like very basic, like pain, is common across like all humans. And so sometimes that's the conversation, right? You don't talk about the deeper psychological stuff. You just focus on the body, and then kind of like I was saying earlier, when you work with the body, then the mind changes, the emotions change. And then this is interesting, something that Andrea wrote in the chat, that PTSD is a physiological response. And yes, obviously, of course, it is a physiological response. At the same time, it is not only a physiological response. It is also it is also something that is happening at the psycho-emotional level, right? This is, I think, where we get in trouble in the Western conventional model of thinking about physical health and mental health as like separate. They're not separate, right? They're the same. It's just a different manifestation. And sort of, again, like kind of tying that back to what Leo was asking. If someone doesn't want to talk about their feelings, but you can, like, they're okay to talk about their body, or even they're not okay to talk about anything, and I just come in and like I feel their pulse and I like do a physical diagnosis, a physical exam, like I can still treat that person, and we can still get movement. And I think I think that there is space to get to a point where you could assess without the person talking to you at all whether they are a good candidate for a particular psychedelic medicine, just by evaluating them physically. Right? Everything, like every like facet, every part of a person where you can get information about them is a window to the entirety, into like the whole of their experience. Okay. What else was coming up? Leo had a fun question. I'm guessing what you meant to write was if I had 100 million to throw at the psychedelic movement, where would I put it? And it's kind of an interesting question. Honestly, my first thought is I would put it into an ad campaign. Like get a Super Bowl ad or something. Just get it out there. Get as many, get like tons and tons of people to see what's up, right? And then they're going to go and they're going to lobby their government officials, and they're going to start support groups in their communities. And we just have to figure out like what the ad is, but that would be money well spent. Just get your average American to pay attention to this movement. Yeah, that'd be great. Anybody else have thoughts, have ideas, questions?
I have an idea. Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
So it's interesting, like what exactly is going on? I guess maybe some people know I've been doing microdosing since late December, and I've also done some ketamine and I did combo a couple years ago, and to me, it seems like it's an energetic, like homeopathic kind of experience. Like the energy of the mushrooms goes into my system and it impacts my brain and my body just in this holistic, energetic, integrative way. Like I see the world as going through this experience of having been on this track of, um, you know, yang energy basically dominating and suppressing the yin, and we've become very overly individuated. That energy is just way too developed, and we are trying to shift right now and into, we're kind of collectively hitting bottom with this way of doing things. Like the British Empire and colonialism and division and oppression, like this is all symptomatic of this overdeveloped yang suppressing the yin. This is a Taoist idea of the evolution of the universe. And now we're hitting bottom, and we need to have that part of us and also in the world basically hit bottom and rise up to support the yin. So we need a realignment. And this yin energy is nature, and nature is coming through to be integrated. It's being integrated in our systems, in our brains, in our bodies. It's making things more diverse, more, holistic, kind of like the acupuncture model as opposed to the allopathic model. It's about just energy rising authentically instead of being suppressed. And nature is the original expression of that. So as it penetrates our brains and our bodies, we start to reconfigure and find that diversity within ourselves, that natural expression. So I liked what you said about how we need to process by expressing it, whatever that looks like, journaling, painting, singing, chanting, meditating, getting out into nature, screaming in your car. That's our natural healing response. I did something called reevaluation counseling in my earlier adulthood, and it basically just embraced the idea that human beings have a natural healing process of discharge, like shaking, screaming, crying, making angry noises, like animals do it. We are animals. We've become divorced from the idea that we are part of nature, part of life, an organism. We've become so identified with our brain, which is part of this individuation kind of track. So that's what I see happening. And it's like the microbiome. The world is a microbiome, and we're learning how to be diverse and integrated and coming together in new ways. I actually just learned about this new platform called The Great Discovery, which is able to have you speak in any language. It uses AI, but it's actually coming through you with your voice, and it, is gonna, like, we don't need to dub anymore. We don't have to have the, well, I guess it's sort of dubbing, but we don't need subtitles. It's a way to communicate on a much more, integrated level. And I think this platform is like an example of our awareness of how much more integrated we can be, how much more connected we can be. And it's actually a very equalitarian platform. Like, anyway, if you're interested in getting in, let me know, because I think I paid like $640 for life, and I get 70% as an affiliate. So it's really quite an incredible equalitarian platform. And it offers a space for people to connect across culture, across languages, so much more freely. Like, this is an example of like a healthier, more diverse microbiome in the world. So buckle up. And I think, psilocybin and psychedelics can help us stay open and not clinging to rigid patterns that have been created by fear and trauma. It helps us loosen up and become what we are, which is part of the flow of energy in the universe. I actually did a ketamine experience a couple Sundays ago, and everything I heard and felt, it was like being in a Koyaanisqatsi film inside of a kaleidoscope on a roller coaster. And I just felt like my DNA was connecting with the DNA lineage lines, genetic information of the people in the room, and we were all just rushing through the universe. Like that's what we are. We're just energy rushing through the universe, choosing to come in a particular way at a particular time because that was what the world needed. You know, they needed that template of energy to come through to balance it out, and us fulfilling that, our own authentic energetic blueprint, our own authenticity, like that's what's going to be the best for the world. So psilocybin, psychedelics is another element that's coming in to support us to reconnect with our divine natures, with our incredible authenticity and diversity, and repopulate the microbiome of the world so that it's healthy again instead of this, you know, and it had to happen. I think the yang energy had to do what it did. We perhaps have the absolute individuation of cultures. Like I can tell you about the different themes that I see in each culture. Like it's beautiful, it's distinct, it's powerful. Like we need that energy. We need that masculine energy to come in and express and individuate. But ideally, it needs to be happening in support of everything that we are and not in this narrow way that's controlling and suppressive, which doesn't support life at this point. So that's what I had.
Yeah, that's great. I think to me, I think on a larger level, it is that shift in consciousness that is going to be necessary. And all other problems are secondary. To a change in, I think exactly what you're saying is, the connection to, to our world, to each other, the recognition that we are both whole as well as part of something greater, something larger. And yeah, certainly I think psychedelics have an important role to play. Right. And of course they were, all of the naturally occurring psychedelics have been used for many thousands of years for that purpose. And it's kind of funny that we're like, discovering these now because, of course they've been around forever. This is a great question. Where do you see ketamine-assisted therapy or other psychedelic medicine in terms of the naturopathic therapeutic order? So for context, the therapeutic order is a model of treatment approaches in naturopathic medicine that asserts that there are interventions or treatments that are less invasive, less intense, and then there are treatments that are more invasive or more intense. So at the very bottom, the thing that is the foundation are things like diet, exercise, right? Things that you do at the level of lifestyle. And at the top, the most invasive and most intense are things like surgery, right? And everything is placed in this therapeutic order. And one of the principles that naturopathic physicians should follow is that you always do lower force, like less invasive treatment approaches first. And you only do the higher force intervention if the lower force intervention doesn't work or is not sufficient. And so this idea of placing psychedelic therapy in therapeutic order is very important, Psychedelic therapy is not going to, like, let's say, you are working night shifts, eating fast food, and living in an apartment that's full of mold, and you're depressed, right? Like, psychedelics are not going to fix any of those things. You have to fix those things first, right? And it's very likely that if you stop working nights and disrupting your circadian rhythm, you start eating healthy whole food, and you move out of your moldy apartment, your depression is going to go away. Whereas, if you do, like, in that kind of situation, especially, for a relatively less robust person, right? In that kind of scenario where they're getting beaten down by the lifestyle, doing psychedelics might provide temporary relief, but it's never going to cure, the depression. What psychedelics might do is give the person enough motivation to change their situation. But they must change their situation or things are not going to shift more permanently. And so, right, this is sort of a scenario where sometimes you need a higher force intervention in order for the person to get the motivation to change the basics, the foundation. Psychedelic therapy is definitely a little bit higher, certainly not at the level of surgery. I would say not at the level of most pharmaceuticals, but certainly above. Like it's a higher force. It's a more intense treatment than changing your diet, than most like herbal medicine. Like the non-toxic botanicals that are used to treat disease in traditional systems. It is higher force than homeopathy. It's higher force. It's probably higher force than like massage. Although now we're kind of getting into a place where maybe there's a little bit more parity, right? So it is, again, like very individual, sometimes like the evaluation is you need psychedelic to shake up your experience so that you can change your life. Other times it's like you have to change your life first, because if you do the psychedelic now, you will be worse off. You actually are not, you don't have the vitality or like capacity to meet the stress that this psychedelic is placing on your system, right? Like it's like, psychedelics are stressful. They ask a lot of the body. And just like you wouldn't tell someone who's been completely sedentary for 10 years to go out and run a 5K on their first day of trying to exercise, sometimes you need to work up to that psychedelic. You can't just take it. It would be too much. It would be too destabilizing. So it's very individual. And, that's, I think, one of the areas that we really need to focus on with psychedelic medicine. I mean, even in the big, controlled trials, a third of people have negative experiences when they have a psychedelic journey. And some people, like, that negative experience is necessary and they come out on the other side in a better place than before. But, for some people, they're worse off, right? That's one of the reasons that psychedelics have a bad rap in the popular mind, the popular culture, is because of those people that, have really lingering negative effects after they do psychedelics. So I think it's especially for us, who are in the psychedelic therapy space, who are providers, who are counselors, we need to be able to recognize, where psychedelics as medicine fits in with everything else. Okay. Some folks raise their hands. Anita?
Thank you, Kai. I've really enjoyed what you've shared so far, and it's been such a blessing to kind of be in and out of the rooms throughout the last 24 hours. But I felt like I wanted to speak to the $100 million question, because I've heard so many brilliant contributors talk and sort of center around this idea of education and informing the message, which is like a huge part. And then like as a person who's looking at ways of like the interlocking systems like capitalism, patriarchy, etc., sort of frame our thinking, whether or not we realize it and we want it to, is like that idea of choosing one thing. And I was like, how would I slice up that $100 million? Or like, you know, like I'm a big fan of like one choice, not great. Two, still we're in duality. But like if you can add a third option, then somehow that opens up many more options and more discussion and all of that stuff. But anyhow, I had thought about like the idea of course, educating and all of that stuff, but what if we poured resources into delivering the best available quality treatment to people who could not even fathom or dream of even seeing a commercial? So I'm talking about urban or rural poor with long ancestral lineages of suffering and overcoming that like this would not even be on the radar for. And like what if this medicine could be used to empower people for whom empowerment isn't even a thought on the scale, and what kind of impact might that have on their communities and accessing this like these unseen forces of potential resilience, and how might, by centering on people who for whom this isn't a legitimate option right now, might actually serve those of us who have made it into this room and like maybe are struggling with accessibility issues, which I think is, unless you're of a certain percent, there are legitimate accessibility issues with psychedelics right now. So it's kind of like my musing, and like over here in my own little world, not on the West Coast, and like visioning and dreaming and hoping to attract others that might think that maybe this is an idea that is worth not just thinking about, but a little bit of conversing about and maybe organizing around, and thinking it's not going to be one person who initiates it, and that it could be possible to think about pouring the resources in a different direction. So that was my thought.
Yeah, that's great. We're almost at the top of the hour. Jane, did you have a last
Yes,
comment?
I actually could pick up right off of that, Anita. I actually met Leo at the psychedelic fair here in Seattle about a month ago, and she was talking about legalization and where we are with that. We're decriminalized in Washington, and people were mentioning how in Southern California a lot of moms struggling with postnatal depression were doing great on psilocybin. And I kind of had this idea, like, what if we bring this solution to this certain population and just make it absolutely obvious that psychedelics and psilocybin are an incredible, powerful, viable solution to a very intractable problem. And I'm not able to go into specifics because, yeah, we're kind of working on this. But yeah, we are definitely approaching people to make this a movement or make this a project and hopefully have visibility and impact legalization as well as, you know, this particular solution for this particular problem. And hopefully it will go through. And I also just wanted to say, you know, I am a choreographer and performer, or have been earlier, and I like to think creatively. I also had a friend who is a choreographer who works with the mycelium, which is where psilocybin is from. It's the Earth's internet. And he was all about how this is a wonderful model for how communities can be. We can be incredibly connected. And I feel like the energy of the mushrooms makes our brains that way. And it makes us creative, and it makes us learn how to interact with one another in a much more creative, diverse, expansive way. So I feel like focusing on our own growth, our own healing is the most impactful thing we can do. We will get creative ideas. We will connect with people of a similar vibration. We will create solutions, and it will have an impact. It will have a ripple effect. So I think just start where you are, is my thought. Until the world is like a mycelium colony, and we're all incredibly interconnected and thriving. That's my vision.
Wonderful. Thank you everyone for being here. I think we're at the end of our 24-hour event, so it's pretty exciting. Been discussing these important topics for 24 hours. I put some links in the chat to my website if anyone is interested in learning a little bit more about me. You can also contact me through there. Also, I've written a couple of articles on psychedelic therapy from a more integrative perspective, mostly like centering Chinese medicine. And I've dropped that link in the chat as well. And then Ashanda, you had asked about spiritual practices, and we're kind of out of time for me to discuss that, but I dropped a link to the website for the main practice that I have been doing for the last 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years. And so, can definitely check that out. It's called Vipassana. And yeah, thanks everyone. I guess we'll just leave things open for a few more minutes to let anyone put some more stuff into the chat. But I look forward to connecting at a future time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Leo.